You know, you've noted that even though that you were looking for greater creative control over the work of art, that you kind of expected the publishing process to be a little more collaborative than it was. You know, you said you kind of expected it to be like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Maxwell Perkins in the smoky room for a year, you know, working something out, whereas, you know, you have noted that the editorial feedback that you got was quite astute, but that there wasn't that much of it. And I kind of wondered, you know, because it's a known phenomenon in publishing that as an author becomes more famous and they become more well-known, they receive less editing, they receive less editorial feedback. Because, you know, maybe the editor doesn't have the cojones to criticize the famous person. And also because, you know, you've noted that there's been changes in the way that movies have been made in recent decades, and there's been some real changes in the way that books are published, too. A lot of the big houses, really all of them, used to be the big six, now it's the big five, increasingly being run more on a corporate model. You know, it seems like some folks at the top have done the math and kind of figured out that editing costs money, and that editing somebody who's already famous does not appreciably, you know, have an impact on sales. So I guess I was wondering, was that a fear of yours coming in, that nobody would have the guts to give you real critical feedback, or that, you know, if you sent it off for consideration, if your agent sent it off, a publisher would just say, oh yeah, it's got Sean Penn's name on it, we'll get it, that'll sell?
Let me start at the end of that and go backwards. This being a brand new world for me, this publishing world and all of that, I call it Spain, because it goes on siesta like nobody's business. You know, in the movie business or in the NGO business, everything has to be done yesterday, and people don't take weekends off. They don't take hours off. They're crazy, and this business makes me realize that I am crazy, because these people are not in a rush. And it was really frustrating to me, but the part of it that I loved, I think where I am is that, first of all, I go as a writer, and this was true in every kind of writing that I had done before the book, I go 100 miles an hour and I finish it. And this was finished in 30 days. And then I rewrite for 2 years on this one. And so when the whole root of the thing is 100 miles an hour, there's two things involved in that. One is, you know exactly what you're doing. Whether or not someone else will like it is another thing. But the other thing that happens is that you've written with the expectation of a reader understanding by osmosis what you haven't written. And so the editorial process for someone like me was only ever going to be, I mean, I like to say I'm 57 and my pool's heated. I wasn't going to take anything that was going to get in the way of it, because frankly, I always had known when I had not done justice to something in film. You never finish it, you abandon it, because there is too much money there. And this one I knew I could finish. And so what I really needed was somebody, which I got in a particularly lucky way with this editor, Peter Borland, was somebody who would say, I don't understand what's happening in this section. I get column notes. What is this? Do you want me to know, or should we move on? And
it's a good editor.
In some cases, I said we should move on. In other cases, not. Because I was writing also in a way, you know, I will call attention to something in your book. I had directed movies. I didn't want to direct readers. And in Susan's book, there's a part where she's talking about the redundancy of certain words, and there's a whole the section. Well, as a reader, we look ahead and we can see that, what that is and go on to the next thing, or we can put ourselves through the very mental exercise that she's suggesting, what it'll do to our sense of that word. My book has things like that too, where I think it takes a patient read. I think that if I weren't in such a lucky position that I had a name value for and so on and all, I might have thought differently. I might, if people had to buy this book for me to make my living, I probably would have approached it differently. But I also thought, what a great luxury potentially for the reader, because there was none of that, and therefore kind of not open to the kind of editorial stuff that might have otherwise been. And it remains to be seen. My favorite review of this book so far is a repugnant piece of garbage. And I thought, boy, if you're wanting to get a reaction, I got one. And it is great to really have written exactly what I wanted to write.
It's your repugnant piece of garbage.
It's mine, yeah.
Well, that said, no writer